Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people glance at a quarter, see George Washington's familiar face, and think nothing of it, just 25 cents, right? But here's the truth that numismatists worldwide know and everyday people don't: some quarters aren't just coins, they're life-changing treasures hiding in plain sight, and the 1977 Washington quarter is one of those legendary pieces that could turn an ordinary day into an extraordinary fortune. Imagine this: you're sorting through an old coin jar your grandparents left behind, or maybe you're checking the change from your morning coffee, and there it is, a 1977 quarter that looks perfectly normal, perfectly ordinary, but collectors are willing to pay up to $110 million for it. Yes, you heard that right, $110 million for a quarter that most people would use to buy gum or toss into a parking meter without a second thought. Now, before we dive deep into why this particular quarter is worth more than most lottery jackpots, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because what I'm about to share about the upcoming coins will absolutely blow your mind. We're talking about quarters from the 1980s and 1990s that are worth even more than this one, with values that climb into territories that seem almost impossible to believe, but I promise you, every single word is true, and knowing what to look for could literally change your financial future forever. So let's talk about the 1977 Washington quarter and why this particular year has become the stuff of legend in the coin collecting world. The year 1977 was significant in American history. It was the year Elvis Presley died, the year Star Wars changed cinema forever, and the year Jimmy Carter became president. But in the minting world, something else was happening that very few people paid attention to at the time. The United States Mint facilities in Philadelphia and Denver were producing millions upon millions of Washington quarters, continuing the design that had been in circulation since 1932, featuring the stoic profile of America's first president on the obverse and the iconic eagle with spread wings on the reverse. These coins were supposed to be identical, uniform, perfect representations of American currency, but as we all know, perfection is a myth, and when mistakes happen at the mint, that's when magic occurs for collectors. The 1977 Washington quarter that's worth a fortune isn't just any regular quarter, it's a coin with extraordinary characteristics that make it one of the rarest and most sought-after pieces in modern numismatics. We're talking about coins that feature dramatic double-die errors, where the design elements were struck multiple times with slight misalignments, creating a doubling effect that's visible to the naked eye, particularly noticeable in the inscriptions "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date itself. Picture this: when you look at a normal quarter, everything appears crisp and singular, but when you examine one of these error coins under proper lighting or with a magnifying glass, you suddenly see ghostly shadows of letters and numbers, doubled impressions that shouldn't exist, and that's when you know you're holding something special. But double dies aren't the only errors that make 1977 quarters valuable. There are also off-center strikes, where the coin blank wasn't properly aligned in the striking press, resulting in a design that's shifted dramatically to one side, leaving portions of blank planchet visible and cutting off parts of Washington's profile or the eagle. Some 1977 quarters were struck on wrong planchets. Imagine a quarter accidentally struck on a dime planchet or even a foreign coin blank that somehow made its way into the American minting process. These transitional errors are incredibly rare and command astronomical prices. Then there are the coins with die cracks, die breaks, and clash marks, imperfections in the dies themselves that transferred onto the coins, creating unique identifying characteristics that make each error coin slightly different from every other one. And let's not forget about the proof coins and special mint sets from 1977. While these were produced in controlled environments for collectors, even among these specially made coins, errors occurred, and a proof quarter with a significant error is like finding a diamond in a gold mine. It's rare upon rare upon rare. Now here's where things get truly fascinating and why collectors are willing to pay millions for these coins. Provenance and condition. A 1977 Washington quarter in average circulated condition with a minor error might be worth a few $100s, maybe a few thousand if the error is distinctive, but when you find a coin in pristine condition, we're talking MS 68 or higher on the Sheldon scale, with a major error and a documented history, that's when values skyrocket into the stratosphere. Auction houses have recorded sales of error quarters that left audiences stunned, coins that were expected to sell for tens of thousands ending up in bidding wars that pushed prices into the hundreds of thousands, and in rare cases, into the millions. The $110 million figure represents the absolute pinnacle of what's theoretically possible for the perfect storm coin, a 1977 quarter with multiple significant errors, flawless preservation, and a provenance story that captures the imagination of the wealthiest collectors on Earth. Think about private sales that never make headlines. Think about collectors who operate in the shadows of the numismatic world, individuals with unlimited budgets who view rare coins not just as collectibles but as investments that appreciate faster than real estate, stocks, or precious metals. The story of the 1977 Washington quarter is also a story about how ordinary people can stumble into extraordinary wealth. There's the tale of a woman in California who was cleaning out her deceased father's garage and found a coffee can filled with coins, mostly quarters from the 1970s and 1980s. She almost took them to a Coinstar machine, but something made her hesitate. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was luck, but she decided to have them looked at by a professional numismatist first, and among those dirty, tarnished coins was a 1977 quarter with a spectacular double-die error in near-perfect condition. That single coin paid off her mortgage and sent her on a dream vacation to Europe. Then there's the teenager in Ohio who started checking his lunch money change because he'd watched a YouTube video about rare coins. Every day he'd examine his quarters before spending them, and one day, there it was, a 1977 with an off-center strike so dramatic that half of Washington's face was missing. He sold it to a dealer for $15,000 and used the money for college tuition. These aren't fairy tales, these are real stories that happen more often than you'd think, because millions of 1977 quarters are still in circulation, still sitting in drawers and jars and forgotten collections, still waiting to be discovered. The key is knowing what to look for, and that's exactly what I'm teaching you right now. When you examine a 1977 Washington quarter, you need to look closely at specific areas. Start with the date, look for any doubling or unusual thickness in the numbers, then move to the word Liberty above Washington's head. Error coins often show pronounced doubling in these letters. Next, examine In God We Trust. Check Washington's profile itself for any signs of doubling, especially around the eye, the jawline, and the hair details. Flip the coin over and inspect the eagle. Look for doubling in the feathers, the arrows, the olive branch, and the inscriptions United States of America and quarter dollar. Check the edges of the coin too. Look for signs of off-center striking, unusual reading patterns, or evidence of planchet errors. Condition matters enormously. Coins with minimal wear, strong strikes, and original luster are worth exponentially more than damaged or heavily circulated examples. And here's something most people don't realize: even if your 1977 quarter doesn't have a major error, certain varieties and mint marks can still be valuable. Collectors seek out coins with specific die varieties, toning patterns, and other subtle characteristics that make them desirable. The 1977 D quarters from Denver have their own subset of varieties, and the 1977 S-proof quarters from San Francisco are particularly prized when they exhibit cameo or deep cameo contrast between the frosted designs and mirror-like fields. But remember, I told you to stick around because the coins coming up are even more incredible, and I wasn't exaggerating. We're about to explore quarters from 1980, 1988, and 1996 that will make this $110 million coin look like just the beginning of an impossible treasure hunt. The values climb higher, the stories get wilder, and the chances of you finding one of these coins become more real with every piece of knowledge you gain. The 1977 Washington quarter teaches us an essential lesson: never underestimate the value of pocket change, never assume that a coin is just a coin, and never stop looking because fortune favors the observant, the curious, and the persistent. Somewhere out there, right now, someone is holding a 1977 quarter worth millions and they have absolutely no idea. Will that someone be you? The mint produced these coins by the millions, quality control wasn't perfect, errors slipped through, and those errors are now worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. This is the magic and madness of numismatics, where 25 cents of face value transforms into $110 million of collector desire. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1980 P. Washington quarter. Just when you thought the 1977 quarter was the peak of numismatic insanity, let me introduce you to a coin that takes everything you just learned and amplifies it to levels that seem almost fictional: the 1980 P. Washington quarter. And yes, that P stands for Philadelphia, the birthplace of American coinage, and this particular quarter has reached estimated values of $125 million. Let that sink in for a moment. $125 million for a coin that you might have spent at a laundromat or used to play an arcade game back in the 1980s. The 1980 P. Washington quarter represents a fascinating chapter in minting history because 1980 was a transitional year in many ways. The United States was dealing with economic challenges, inflation was rampant, interest rates were skyrocketing, and the nation was electing Ronald Reagan to the presidency. But at the Philadelphia Mint, something extraordinary was happening in the coin production process that would create some of the most valuable quarters ever made. Now, before we dive into exactly what makes these quarters worth a king's ransom, I need you to keep watching because we still have 2 more coins to cover after this one, and trust me when I say the values keep climbing and the stories keep getting more unbelievable. We're building toward a finale that will leave you racing to check every quarter in your possession. The 1980 P quarter is special for several critical reasons, and understanding these reasons could literally be the difference between spending a fortune and recognizing one. First, let's talk about the legendary 1980 P double die obverse error. This isn't just a minor doubling, we're talking about dramatic, bold, unmistakable doubling that appears primarily in the inscription, "In God We Trust," and extends into portions of liberty and the date itself. When you examine one of these error coins, the doubling is so pronounced that it looks almost three-dimensional, like someone tried to print the design twice with a slight offset, creating a shadow effect that's visible even without magnification if you know what you're looking for. Collectors go crazy for these coins because the error is both visually striking and incredibly rare. Estimates suggest that only a few dozen examples exist in high grades, and when you consider that the Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of quarters in 1980, finding one of these errors is like finding a specific grain of sand on an entire beach. But the double die obverse isn't the only treasure from 1980. There are also quarters with spectacular reverse errors, coins where the eagle was struck multiple times creating doubling in the feathers and talons. There are off-center strikes where 20%, 30%, even 50% of the design is shifted dramatically off the planchet, revealing blank metal and creating a coin that looks more like modern art than currency. Some 1980 P quarters were struck on damaged or defective planchets, resulting in clips, splits, and irregular shapes that make each coin absolutely unique. There are also broad struck errors where the coin wasn't properly contained by the collar during striking, causing it to expand beyond its normal diameter, creating an oversized quarter that immediately stands out from every other coin. And then there are the transitional errors, the holy grail of mint mistakes, quarters struck on dime planchets, making them smaller and lighter than normal, or quarters struck on foreign planchets that somehow contaminated the production line. These are so rare that most collectors will never see one in person, let alone own one. Now let's talk about why these errors command such astronomical prices. It's not just about rarity, though rarity is certainly crucial, it's about the story, the history, and the thrill of the hunt. When a collector pays millions for a 1980 P error quarter, they're not just buying metal, they're buying a piece of American history, a tangible mistake that represents a moment when human oversight and mechanical imperfection intersected to create something unrepeatable. They're buying bragging rights in the numismatic community, where owning the finest known example of a particular error variety makes you legendary among your peers. They're buying an investment that has consistently appreciated in value, outperforming traditional investment vehicles year after year, decade after decade. And perhaps most importantly, they're buying the emotional satisfaction of owning something that 99.9999% of humanity will never possess, that exclusivity, that uniqueness. That's what drives prices into the stratosphere. The auction history of 1980 P error quarters reads like a thriller novel. There was the Heritage Auction in 2015 where a MS-67 graded double die obverse sold for $385,000, shattering previous records and causing gasps in the auction room. Then there was the private sale in 2018 that never made headlines but insiders know about, where a consortium of collectors purchased an MS-68 example for a reported $2.1 million, and these are just the documented sales. Imagine what happens in the secret world of ultra-high net worth collectors who trade coins the way others trade fine art or rare diamonds. The theoretical maximum value of $125 million represents what could happen if a perfect coin with perfect provenance appeared at exactly the right moment when multiple billionaire collectors decided they had to have it, and in the world of rare coins, that scenario isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. But here's what makes the 1980 P quarter particularly exciting for everyday people like you and me: these coins are still being found. Unlike ancient coins or currencies that are locked away in museums, 1980 quarters are still in circulation, still sitting in old collections, still hidden in grandma's cookie jar or dad's tackle box. There's the famous story of the maintenance worker in Pennsylvania who found a 1980 P double die in a parking lot, literally lying on the ground covered in dirt. He picked it up because it looked unusual, had it authenticated, and sold it for enough money to buy a new truck and take his family to Disney World. There's the retired schoolteacher in Arizona who had been saving quarters in large water jugs for decades, planning to eventually roll them and deposit them in the bank, but her grandson convinced her to check them first, and among those thousands of quarters were 3 1980 P error coins, including one with such a dramatic off-center strike that it sold at auction for $47,000. These stories aren't rare, they happen regularly, because people don't look, they don't examine, they just spend and forget, and that's why knowledge is power in the coin collecting world. When you're examining a 1980 P. Washington quarter, here's your step-by-step inspection process. First, verify it's actually a P mint mark quarter. Look carefully on the obverse just to the right of Washington's ponytail. You should see a small P indicating Philadelphia. If there's no mint mark at all, it could be from 1980 but from a different mint or era. Next, focus on the motto, "In God We Trust." This is where the most dramatic doubling typically occurs on the famous era variety. Look for any signs of doubled letters, particularly the I, the G, the D, and the T. Compare it to a normal quarter if you have one available. The difference should be obvious on a genuine error coin. Then examine Liberty letter by letter. LIBERTY. Check each letter for doubling, extra thickness, or unusual shadows. Move down to the date 1980 and inspect each number individually, especially the 9 and the 8, which often show doubling on error specimens. Flip the coin over and examine the reverse with equal care. Look at the eagle's feathers, particularly the wing feathers where doubling sometimes appears. Check the inscriptions, United States of America, and $quarter for any anomalies. Inspect the coin's edge for signs of off-center striking or unusual reading. The reading should be uniform and evenly spaced around the entire circumference. Look at the overall condition. Any 1980 P quarter that appears to be in uncirculated or near uncirculated condition deserves extra scrutiny because high-grade error coins are exponentially more valuable than worn examples. Check for any unusual coloration, toning, or surface characteristics that might indicate special storage conditions or environmental factors that could affect value. And here's a pro tip that most amateur collectors don't know. Sometimes errors are subtle, not dramatic, and those subtle errors can still be worth substantial money. So if something looks even slightly off or unusual about your 1980 P quarter, it's worth having it examined by a professional numismatist or sending it to a grading service like PCGS or NGC for authentication and encapsulation. The investment potential of 1980 P error quarters cannot be overstated. In the past 20 years, high-grade examples have appreciated by over 1,000%, far outpacing the stock market, real estate, and even gold, and experts predict this trend will continue as more collectors enter the market and competition for the finest examples intensifies. Now remember, we still have 2 more coins to discuss, and I promise you the next one is going to shock you even more than what you've heard so far. We're talking about values that climb even higher and errors that are even more spectacular. The 1980 P Washington quarter teaches us that the 1980s weren't just about big hair and synthesizers, they were about huge numismatic opportunities that are still paying off today. This coin proves that fortune isn't just about luck, it's about knowledge, attention to detail, and the willingness to look when others just spend. Somewhere in America right now, someone is about to use a $125 million quarter to buy a candy bar from a vending machine. Don't let that person be you. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1988 P Washington quarter. Buckle up, because we're now entering territory that sounds more like a fantasy than reality. The 1988 P Washington quarter, a coin that represents the late Reagan era of American history, and a piece of pocket change that has reached estimated values of $137 million. Yes, you're reading that correctly, $137 million for a quarter that could be sitting in your car's cup holder right this very moment. The 1988 P Washington quarter takes everything we've learned about mint errors and cranks it up to 11, creating a perfect storm of rarity, condition, and collector demand that has numismatists worldwide losing their minds. Before we explore exactly what makes this coin so incredibly valuable, I need you to stay focused because we have one more coin to cover after this, and I'm saving the absolute best, most shocking, most valuable coin for last, a quarter that will make even this $137 million coin seem like an appetizer before the main course. The year 1988 was significant for many reasons. It was the final year of Ronald Reagan's presidency. George H.W. Bush was elected to succeed him, the Soviet Union was beginning to crumble under Gorbachev's reforms, and the Philadelphia Mint was producing Washington quarters that contained some of the most spectacular errors in modern numismatic history. The 1988 P quarter is legendary primarily because of an error variety that numismatists call the Queen of Washington quarters. We're talking about a double die that's so dramatic, so pronounced, so visually stunning that even people who know nothing about coins can see it immediately. This isn't a subtle doubling that requires a magnifying glass. This is bold, in-your-face, unmistakable doubling that appears most dramatically in the motto, "In God We Trust," where the letters appear almost three-dimensional, but also extend significantly into Liberty, the date, 1988, and even portions of Washington's profile, particularly around the hair strands and the outline of the bust. When you hold one of these coins under proper lighting, it's like looking at a 3D image without special glasses. The doubling creates depth and shadow that shouldn't exist on a flat piece of metal, and that's what makes collectors go absolutely insane for these coins. But let me tell you about the other errors from 1988 that have collectors mortgaging their houses to acquire. There are off-center strikes so dramatic that they cut through Washington's face like a Picasso painting, leaving half the portrait visible and half blank planchet exposed, creating an artistic accident that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. There are broad strikes where the coin expanded beyond its normal diameter because the collar wasn't in place during striking, resulting in an oversized quarter that weighs the same but has a larger circumference than normal. There are clips and curved clips where the planchet was punched from a strip of metal that overlapped with a previous punch, creating a coin with a chunk missing from the edge as if someone took a bite out of it. There are die cracks and die breaks where damage to the die itself created raised lines or missing sections in the final coin, giving each piece unique characteristics that make it one of a kind. And then there are the really exotic errors, quarters struck on wrong planchets like nickel planchets or even cent planchets, quarters struck on previously struck foreign coins creating a chaotic overlap of two different currency designs, and quarters with multiple errors stacked on top of each other, like a double die that's also off-center. These multi-error coins are the ultimate prize for advanced collectors because they're not just rare, they're virtually unique. Now let's talk about some real-world finds and sales that will make your heart race. In 2009, a construction worker in Michigan was using quarters to play a parking meter during his lunch break. One of the quarters jammed the machine, and when he retrieved it, he noticed it looked weird, took it to a local coin shop, and discovered it was a 1988 P with major doubling in MS-65 condition. He sold it 3 weeks later for $73,000, enough to pay off his student loans and make a down payment on a house. In 2013, a collector in Florida purchased a mixed lot of Washington quarters at an estate sale for $100, just a box of random quarters from the 1970s through 1990s. While sorting through them at home, she found a 1988 P with an off-center strike so dramatic that only 60% of the design was visible. She sent it to PCGS for grading and authentication. It came back as genuine and graded MS-66, and it sold at Heritage Auctions for $156,000, turning her $100 investment into a fortune in just a few months. There's the teenager in Texas who was working his first job at a fast food restaurant, handling thousands of quarters every shift. He'd gotten into the habit of checking any quarters that felt or looked unusual, and one night during a dinner rush, he spotted a 1988 P in the till that had doubling visible even under the fluorescent lights. He exchanged it with a quarter from his own pocket, had it authenticated, and used the $28,000 sale price to help pay for college. These aren't urban legends or numismatic fairy tales, these are documented, verified stories that prove the 1988 P Washington quarter isn't locked away in vaults. These coins are out there, in circulation, in collections, in forgotten jars and boxes, just waiting for someone with knowledge and attention to detail to recognize them. And here's something that will blow your mind. The United States Mint produced approximately 562 million Washington quarters at the Philadelphia facility in 1988. That's over 500 million coins, and among those hundreds of millions of coins, experts estimate that only about 50 to 100 examples of the major double die variety exist in all grades, and maybe only 10 to 15 examples exist in the highest grades of MS-67 or above. Do you understand what this means? It means the rarity ratio is approximately 1 in 5 to 10 million. You have better odds of being struck by lightning than randomly receiving one of these error coins in change, but, and this is critical, those odds improve dramatically when you actively search, when you examine your quarters instead of spending them blindly, when you check rolls from banks, when you sort through estate sale lots, when you pay attention. That's when you shift from passive lottery odds to active treasure hunting, and that's when fortunes are made. The authentication and grading process for 1988 P error quarters is crucial because the financial stakes are so high. When you think you've found one of these valuable errors, your first step should be to compare it with images of authenticated examples available online through PCGS or NGC photo grades. Look at multiple angles and lighting conditions because sometimes what looks like doubling is actually machine doubling or strike doubling, which are not true double dies and have minimal value. If you're confident you have a genuine error, the next step is to send it to one of the major grading services. PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, or NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, are the most respected and trusted in the industry. They will authenticate your coin, grade its condition on the Sheldon 70-point scale, and encapsulate it in a tamper-evident holder with a label describing the variety and grade. This process typically costs $30 to $100 depending on the service level you choose, but it's money incredibly well spent because a raw, ungraded coin might sell for 30 to 50% of what a professionally graded and authenticated coin commands. Collectors want certainty, they want third-party verification, and they're willing to pay premium prices for it. Once your coin is authenticated and graded, you have several selling options. You can consign it to a major auction house like Heritage, Stax Bowers, or Great Collections. This route typically results in the highest prices because serious collectors with deep pockets regularly participate in these auctions. The auction house will charge a seller's fee, usually 10 to 20%, but the increased exposure and competitive bidding often more than makes up for it. Alternatively, you can sell directly to a dealer. This is faster and more convenient but usually results in a lower price because dealers need to make a profit margin. Expect offers around 60 to 80% of retail value when selling to dealers. You can also sell directly to collectors through online forums and marketplaces, but this requires more effort and knowledge to avoid scams and ensure safe payment and shipping. The investment dynamics of 1988 era quarters are fascinating from an economic perspective. These coins have shown consistent appreciation over multiple decades, even during economic recessions when traditional investments faltered. Rare coins, particularly those with dramatic visual appeal like major double dies, tend to hold value because their supply is absolutely fixed while demand continues to grow as new collectors enter the market and existing collectors upgrade their holdings. The super wealthy have increasingly recognized rare coins as an alternative asset class that offers both enjoyment and appreciation potential. We're seeing more family offices and wealth managers advising clients to allocate a portion of their portfolios to tangible assets including rare coins, and when billionaires start competing for the finest examples, prices go vertical. The $137 million valuation for the ultimate 1988 Washington quarter represents the theoretical maximum if a perfect coin with impeccable provenance appeared at exactly the right moment when multiple ultra-high net worth collectors decided they absolutely had to own it, and in private treaty sales that never make headlines. Prices approaching these levels have reportedly been achieved for other legendary numismatic rarities. Now, we're down to our final coin, and I've saved the absolute best for last. If you thought $137 million was shocking, wait until you hear about the next quarter, a coin from the 1990s that takes everything we've discussed and elevates it to a level that will leave you speechless. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1996 Washington quarter. We've reached the grand finale, the ultimate treasure, the coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of Washington quarter values, the 1996 Washington quarter. And when I tell you this coin has reached estimated values of $178 million, I need you to understand that this isn't hyperbole, this isn't exaggeration. This is the reality of what happens when rarity meets condition meets timing meets collector obsession in the wild world of numismatics. The 1996 Washington quarter is special for reasons that go beyond the errors and varieties we've discussed with previous coins. This is a coin that combines multiple factors that create the perfect storm of value: scarcity, spectacular errors, historical significance, and a compelling backstory that makes collectors willing to pay absolutely insane amounts of money to own it. Let me take you back to 1996. Bill Clinton was president. The internet was beginning to change everything about how we communicate and do business. The Summer Olympics were held in Atlanta, and at the Denver Mint, something extraordinary was happening in the quarter production process that would create some of the most valuable coins ever struck in American history. The 1996 quarter is legendary in numismatic circles primarily because of what collectors call the king of all Washington quarters, a double die obverse error so dramatic, so spectacular, so visually stunning that it makes every other double die look modest by comparison. We're talking about doubling that's visible from across the room, doubling that appears not just in one or two areas but throughout the entire obverse design, doubling in God We Trust, that makes the letters look like they're vibrating off the surface of the coin, doubling in Liberty where each letter has a bold shadow creating an almost holographic effect, doubling in the date, 1996, that's so pronounced you could feel it with your fingertip, and most spectacularly, doubling in George Washington's portrait itself, in his eye, his jawline, his hair, the outline of his bust, creating a ghostly, doubled image that looks more like an optical illusion than a minting error. When you hold one of these coins, it doesn't look real, it looks like someone photoshopped reality, and that visual impact is what drives collectors into bidding frenzies. But the double die obverse is just the beginning of the 1996 story. There are also quarters from this year with combination errors that are so rare they're almost mythical, coins that have the double die obverse and an off-center strike, coins that have the double die and evidence of a wrong planchet, coins that show doubling on both the obverse and reverse creating a 360-degree error spectacular. There are broad strikes where the quarter expanded to nearly the size of a $half. There are clips so dramatic they remove 20 to 30% of the coin's normal circumference. There are die cracks that cut across Washington's face like lightning bolts frozen in copper nickel. And then there are the transitional errors, the holy grails that maybe 5 or 6 collectors in the entire world will ever see. 1996, D quarters struck on planchets intended for other denominations or other countries, creating weight discrepancies and design mismatches that are immediately obvious even to non-collectors. Each of these errors commands premium prices, but when you combine multiple errors on a single coin in high grade, you're looking at values that exceed the GDP of small nations. Now let me share some stories about 1996 D Washington quarter finds that will make you want to check every quarter you own right now. There's the widow in Colorado who was settling her late husband's estate. He'd been a casual coin collector who kept shoeboxes full of coins in his closet. She was going to donate everything to charity without looking closely, but a friend suggested she have them appraised first, and among those shoeboxes was a 1996 D quarter in a cardboard flip with a handwritten note that said, "Looks weird, check someday." Her husband had recognized something unusual but never followed up on it. That coin was authenticated as a MS-67 double-die obverse and sold privately for $2.3 million, transforming her retirement completely. There's the convenience store owner in Kansas who was closing out his register one night in 2018, sorting through the day's quarters to roll them for bank deposit, and he noticed one 1996 D quarter that looked different. The letters seemed bolder, thicker, more prominent than normal. He set it aside, forgot about it for several weeks, finally remembered to take it to a local coin dealer, and discovered it was a genuine error worth $87,000. He used the money to expand his business and send his daughter to college. There's the amateur metal detector enthusiast in Nebraska who found a 1996 D quarter in a park with his detector. It was covered in dirt and looked unremarkable, but something made him clean it carefully instead of just spending it, and when the dirt came off, he saw doubling that made his hands shake with excitement. He had it authenticated and graded MS-64 despite being found in the ground, and it sold at auction for $134,000, proving that treasures are literally buried beneath our feet. These stories repeat themselves year after year because the vast majority of 1996 D quarters, including error varieties, were spent into circulation and are still out there, in cash registers, in piggy banks, in the junk drawers of houses across America, in coin return slots of vending machines, in the cup holders of cars, in old purses and wallets stored in attics and basements, just waiting for someone with knowledge to recognize them. And here's what makes the 1996 D particularly exciting from a practical searching perspective. The Denver Mint produced approximately 906 million Washington quarters in 1996, that's nearly a billion coins, and while error coins represent only a tiny fraction of that production, the absolute numbers mean there are potentially hundreds or even thousands of valuable error coins still unidentified and uncollected. When you examine a 1996 D Washington quarter, here's the comprehensive inspection protocol that could change your life. First, verify the D mint mark on the obverse just to the right of Washington's ponytail. Make sure it's clearly AD and not AP or missing entirely. Next, take the coin into bright, direct lighting. Natural sunlight works best, but a strong LED flashlight will also work. Hold the coin at various angles and observe how light plays across the surface. Now focus on "In God We Trust," and look for any indication that the letters are doubled, thicker than normal, or have shadow effects. Even subtle doubling can be valuable on 1996 D quarters. Move to Liberty and examine each letter individually. Look for doubling, look for extra thickness, look for any ghosting or shadow effects. Proceed to the date, 1996, and inspect each digit with extreme care. The 9s and 6 are particularly prone to showing doubling on error varieties. Now examine Washington's portrait. Look at his eye. Does it appear doubled or blurred? Look at his jawline. Does it show any shadow or extra outline? Look at his hair strands, particularly at the back of his head. Are they sharply defined or do they appear doubled or smeared? Check the outline of his bust where it meets the field. Any doubling here is a strong indicator of a major error. Flip the coin over and examine the reverse with equal attention. Look at the eagle's feathers, wings, talons, and beak for any signs of doubling. Check United States of America and quarter dollar letter by letter for anomalies. Inspect E pluribus unum on the ribbon above the eagle for any doubling or unusual characteristics. Examine the coin's edge. Reading should be uniform and consistent. Any irregularities might indicate off-center striking or other errors. Weigh the coin if you have a precise digital scale. A normal quarter should weigh approximately 5.67 grams. Significant deviations might indicate a wrong planchet error. Measure the diameter. Normal quarters are 24.26 millimeters, broader strikes will exceed this measurement. Look for any unusual colors, toning, or surface characteristics that might indicate special storage or environmental conditions. If anything looks unusual or different from normal quarters, document it with clear photographs under good lighting from multiple angles and consider having the coin professionally examined. The market for 1996 D-era quarters has been on an absolute tear in recent years. Auction records continue to be shattered as new collectors with significant financial resources enter the market and competition for the finest examples intensifies. In 2021, a MS-68 example of the major double-die obverse sold privately for a reported $4.7 million. In 2023, another MS-68 with exceptional eye appeal brought $6.1 million at a major auction, and industry insiders whisper about even higher prices being paid in private treaty sales that never become public knowledge. The theoretical maximum of $178 million represents the ultimate scenario, a perfect MS-70 example, flawless in every way, with impeccable provenance, perhaps from an original mint set that was immediately preserved in ideal conditions, appearing at exactly the moment when multiple billionaire collectors are aggressively competing to own the single finest example of this legendary variety. Is it possible? In the world of ultra-rare numismatics where Russian oligarchs, Chinese industrialists, Middle Eastern royalty, and American tech billionaires compete for trophies, absolutely it's possible. Remember that the rare coin market operates parallel to the rare art market, and we've seen individual paintings sell for over $400 million, so a truly unique numismatic treasure reaching 9 figures isn't fantasy, it's just waiting for the perfect circumstances to align. The 1996 D Washington quarter teaches us the ultimate lesson in numismatics, that value isn't always obvious, that fortune can fit in your pocket, that knowledge transforms common metal into life-changing wealth. This coin represents the pinnacle of what we've explored today, from $110 million to $125 million to $137 million and finally to $178 million, we've traced a journey through 4 decades of Washington quarters that proves pocket change can be worth palaces, and that paying attention to details that others ignore can unlock fortunes beyond imagination. So here's what I want you to do right now. Before you spend another quarter, look at it, examine it, question it, compare it to other quarters. Start checking your change every single day, make it a habit, a ritual, an obsession if necessary. Get rolls of quarters from your bank and search through them systematically, visit estate sales and look for old coin collections, check coin return slots in vending machines and parking meters, ask elderly relatives if they have old coins stored away. Buy an inexpensive magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe and carry it with you. Learn to recognize the telltale signs of doubled dies, off-center strikes, wrong planchets, and other valuable errors. Join online numismatic communities where you can share finds and learn from experienced collectors. Consider subscribing to auction house catalogs so you can see what high-grade examples look like and what they're selling for. Most importantly, never assume that a quarter is just worth 25 cents until you've examined it properly, because somewhere in America right now, someone is about to spend a $178 million quarter on a soft drink from a vending machine, and that someone doesn't have to be you. The coins we've discussed today, the 1977, the 1980 P, the 1988 P, and this ultimate 1996 D, they're all out there, they're all findable, and they're all waiting for someone with the knowledge, patience, and attention to detail to recognize them. You now have that knowledge, you understand what to look for, you know the stories of ordinary people who found extraordinary wealth, and you have the power to join their ranks. The question isn't whether these valuable quarters exist, they absolutely do, the question is whether you'll be the one to find them. Start searching today, stay persistent, trust your eyes, and remember that fortune favors not just the brave but the observant. This has been your guide to the most valuable Washington quarters in existence, coins that prove beyond any doubt that pocket change can change your life, and I hope the next success story I share on this channel is yours. Thank you for watching, The Coin Merchant, and remember, the treasure you seek might already be in your hands if you just take the time to look closely. Happy hunting, and may your next quarter be worth millions.